Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're new to the channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a new video that's posted. My last video was an introduction of what I hope to cover throughout all the videos, and this week I just wanted to fill you in a bit more about my past, just the basics, and then we can kind of break it down from there for each video. So let's go back in time. My mother is a teacher. My father was a teacher for about 14 years, and now he owns his own construction business. I am number 4 out of 6 children. I have 2 older sisters, 1 older brother, and a younger sister and a younger brother. We lived out in the country, and the road that we lived up on had like 2 or 3 other families that also had large amounts of children, so it was really great. You always had someone to play with. When my mother was pregnant with me, she told me that the placenta did break. They did not do very many ultrasounds back then, so she didn't really have one after it had happened to like check up on it. She said the doctors just told her either it would heal by itself or I would end up being a stillborn. And when I was born, she said that the placenta had actually overly healed itself. Even though this happened, I am told by Dr. Schur that I did not get ACC from that, rather that a random gene in me mutated. And in one of my upcoming videos, I will talk a little bit more about my talk with Dr. Schur and about the random mutated gene and things. Again, back to when I was younger, I did have casts on my legs to straighten them. I believe I got them on around 8 or 9 months old, and at one point one of the casts went up over my knee because I kept trying to get them off. And I learned that I did actually learn how to crawl in them because I was still in them around towards the end of like 11, 12 months. I did also have to wear this like metal contraption that held your legs still at night. And for a while it just held my legs in place and still. My older brother had to wear it too. My mother said she always hated putting us in it because, you know, she felt bad that we couldn't move and we were so little. As a baby, I'm told that I cried all the time. In fact, my mom warned me with Lillian to be prepared that she was just going to cry all the time. It's one of the things, the crying all the time is one of the things that my family and my siblings love to remind me of and how much it tortured them. I only stopped crying if my mom was holding me. If she left and went somewhere, my dad would just put everybody in our van and drive around until I fell asleep because he said that's the only way he could get me to stop crying. I'm also told by them that I came out talking. I don't exactly know when I started talking. I do know that my first word was lady. That's what I called my second oldest sister, who liked to take care of me a lot as her own baby. Growing up, like once I hit middle school, definitely high school, but middle school, I started to feel pretty lost and alone a lot. I do have a lot of memories of myself sitting behind my bedroom door crying while everyone else is still out eating dinner. My older brother would pick on me a lot, and I would get so upset I would just get up and storm down our hallway and slam the door shut, and I just sat on the other side of the door and cried. As an adult now, though, when I think back on those moments, I actually wonder if he wasn't being mean and maybe I actually was misunderstanding what he was saying. And I do know that I have trouble with people's tone of voice, but I didn't know this back then, so I'm wondering if I just completely was not getting his tone and didn't realize that he wasn't being mean. I also did constantly then think about my future, just because I felt so alone. I just wanted to be on to the next step, So I made my list of what I wanted my life to be like, where I wanted it to go. I felt like I couldn't wait to move out, but it was so far away. You know, when you're like 12 years old, 30 is like forever. So for years, I even just kept boxes of my stuff packed away in the back of the closet, so when it was time to go, I could just grab them and go. Even through elementary, through high school, I was friends with most everyone in school. Everyone knew me, I knew them, we were all friendly. As far as my close friends go, the friends that I actually talked to on the phone or had over, I only had about 3 at a time. 2 of them stayed constant. They were my best friends, and then the third one would change often. My first best friend I met when I was 3 years old, and we are still very close friends. My other best friend and I met in middle school, and he actually just passed away about 8 years ago. When I was in high school, my senior year, they let me cut through a lot of red tape for things that you would normally need paperwork to be allowed to do. My mother being a teacher, she knew the guidance counselor, and they gave me a note to take around to all my teachers, allowing me to take tests out of the classroom. This way I could have it quiet, in my setting and an extended time to take the test. This worked okay sometimes. I didn't really speak up as much as I do now, and it was hard to make the teachers realize that it wasn't actually the students in the room that were bothering me. It was the sounds, like repetitive sounds, like someone tapping a pencil, or the ticking of a clock, or the fan buzzing. So sometimes I would actually get moved multiple times because they would move me, but they would move me like to the back of a room right next to a fan, and that just didn't work. I knew for college that I needed to be able to take tests out of the classroom, but for college you need the actual real paperwork. So the guidance counselor recommended that we see a neurologist, and then the neurologist is the one that recommended we get an MRI for my paperwork in my file. So I went with my mom to get one, and she told me she was standing in the room with the doctor, and he actually started panicking because what he saw was where the corpus callosum should be. All he saw was fluid. So he actually assumed that he couldn't see the corpus callosum because my head was filling with spinal fluid. Instead of realizing that I just had extra in the corpus callosum he couldn't see because it wasn't there. They wanted me to do another MRI and give me some kind of dye to be able to look in there more, but I said no to that. And then they just let us go. They didn't tell us much more then while we were there. We were sent back to the neurologist for the results, and he explained to us about the missing corpus callosum and what that piece of your brain is supposed to do. And he was actually very surprised that I was sitting there normal, because to them I was told I should be blind and, you know, retarded, they used the word back then, and handicapped, and have no motor skills and no coordination and all this stuff, and then here I am just sitting there. And he actually asked us that when we researched it to send him the information, because he knew very, very little about the disorder. In fact, I don't think he knew anything other than what the corpus callosum was and what it was supposed to do. But then that was 14 years ago, and even still today, I bump into doctors all the time that will still ask me questions, and I end up knowing more about the disorder than they do. So here I was, 19 years old, and I was about to start college, and I get this news from the neurologist that I'm missing this part of my brain. So what happens next then, right? So my mom and I left the building silently. We got into the car silently, and then we just sat there for a few minutes silently. And then she just quietly says to me, "So what do you think about all this?" And I almost felt like I was in like kind of a fog, because you wonder like what is really going on, like I was not expecting news like that, but it was almost like the fog then lifted, and I got so happy. I will never forget the words that I said to her, and I breathed a sigh of relief, and I said to her, "Wow, I am really not that stupid." Because for years, I struggled being able to understand why I couldn't get an A++ like the rest of my siblings, no matter how hard I tried. I was a C+ student. So I was so happy to finally have an answer and know that I actually was pretty smart. I mean, I can do things just like my siblings and my friends, but they have to use more of their brain to do it. And I try to remind myself of that years ago I would remind myself of that whenever I felt down about that I didn't feel like I was as smart enough for whatever situation I was in. My mother then is the one that started researching people without corpus callosums, and that's when she found her way to Lynn Paul. If you don't know Lynn Paul, she is a wonderful, wonderful researcher at Caltech University. Lynn has had me flown out to California to do more MRIs and tests for their research, along with Warren Brown, who also does a lot of the research. I've done some tests for him. And this is basically where my story begins, my ACC story. I had to learn to recognize my behaviors. I had to learn to control certain actions, just socially and emotionally. I had to learn to think more carefully, and I was determined to figure out who I really was. Through it all, I have learned one very, very important lesson that I do plan to pass on to my daughter Lillian, who also has ACC. It's one of the things that I have always told myself to remain strong. And what it is, I like to say that this disorder does not define me. I define this disorder. So, on that note, tune in next week and hear some of the answers to some of the questions that people have sent to me so far. Little bit on like just some social things and some tips to hopefully help your children. I hope you liked my video. I'm sorry it was a bit long. I tried to crunch it together as best as I could, just to give you that background information on me. Please make sure to click like and leave a comment if you want. Thank you so much. And remember, this disorder does not define you. You define this disorder.